A new man has been named for the Duke baseball team. Super excited to dive into that here today on Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man. To Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us today on Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics each and every day. On today's show, we got to talk about the new Duke baseball head coach, Corey Muscara, will take over the program following Chris Pollard's departure. Excited to dive in to his career so far and what to expect out of the Blue Devils' new coach with our good friend Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated here on today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also, make sure that you can watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Check us out over there. Like this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel as we're always trying to grow over there and get closer and closer to 4,000 subscribers. Also, check us out on X at LO_Blue Devils, and we're on Instagram and TikTok as well. So without further ado, Conor O'Neill joins us on the program here today. I hope that you are doing well, my friend. We'll dive into this new baseball coach here for the Blue Devils. Over the weekend, we saw LSU win the national championship, bringing to a close the season for college baseball. And now Duke knows who their next man is going to be taking over the program in Corey Muscara.
Yeah. The college baseball season comes such a fast, the ending of it. And roster construction goes, for my money, college baseball roster construction is crazier than football and basketball. So yeah, it was imperative that Duke get somebody in there now, and that's Moose as he's been known around Wake's program.
Okay, so he's the Wake Forest pitching coach, and now he's been tasked to take over this Duke baseball program, of course, following Coach Pollard's departure. You mentioned Coach Moose is how so many people know him throughout the industry. Tell us a little bit about him, Conor.
He very well may be a genius when it comes to the art of pitching. The player development over the last 4 years in Wake's pitchers has been pretty remarkable when you think about what Rhett Lauder was able to become, what some of the relievers have been able to do. Seth Keener, Teddy McGraw got picked, I think, in the 3rd round after not throwing a single pitch in his draft eligible season. He was that good in the spring and in the season before that. Chase Burns is the latest example. He makes his MLB debut tonight, roughly 13 months after his career ended at Wake Forest. And he was a guy that was great as a freshman at Tennessee, had a sophomore slump for Tennessee and fell out of their weekend rotation. He comes to Wake Forest, sets all kinds of records, wins ACC Pitcher of the Year, throwing 100 plus. I think the lines on his first pitch tonight are like, it's either going to be 101 plus or 99 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour.
I love that that's there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, look, Wake has made the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row. Corey Muscara was Wake's pitching coach for the last 4 seasons. That's not a coincidence. It's not just because of Moose. Let's make that abundantly clear. Like, you got to hit the ball too. And Wake wasn't winning every game 2-0 for the last 4 years. But Moose deserves a lot of credit for where Wake's program is right now. The other side of this is Moose wanted to be a head coach. And successful assistant coaches, if they're ambitious and they want to be a head coach, they're going to get to that level sooner rather than later. And so it was kind of time for that to happen. He was the rumors were swirling that he was going to go to Mississippi State with Brian O'Connor. This is the domino effect that has been college baseball in involving pretty much 4 programs now, with Mississippi State firing their coach, Brian O'Connor going from Virginia to there, Virginia hiring Duke's Chris Pollard, and now Duke grabbing Corey Muscara from Wake Forest. It's a good hire. I'm still a little surprised that it's not Josh Jordan, but I understand there's all kinds of behind the scenes and logistical things that go into these things, and Duke landed on Moose.
And a lot of people within the sport that are following college baseball 365 super excited about this opportunity for him, who, as he becomes the 26th head baseball coach in Duke history. He's got 15 years of college coaching experience, but has yet to get the call to be the head coach of a program. Prior to 4 seasons at Wake Forest, he was at Maryland for about 4 years. He was at St. John's for about 4 years. So he's taken various programs, done really well with their pitching staffs. And now it's just a matter of time for people like that in the sport, Connor. So now he's got his chance to be his own head baseball coach.
Yeah, and you've got to, for me, maybe this is more, it's jaded by a little personal background, but you always respect the guys that climb the ladder, right? Moose is not somebody that was born on third base. That analogy works even better when you're talking about baseball guys. He's worked his way up. Gosh, I can't remember what the first job Moose had, but it's some school that you might never have heard of. He graduated. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to
Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce said he graduated from Franklin Pierce and then began his coaching career at Southern New Hampshire.
There you go.
So he's been all over the place.
Yeah, some seat of the pants research.
Exactly.
Here. But yeah, he's worked his way up, and a guy like that has had to prove himself multiple times, and it's obviously worked out. He's never, as far as I can tell, he's never taken a step backward. He's never, experienced where he's had to go back a level or back a step to prove himself. And then I think there's value in that.
And we'll see him take over a Duke baseball program, obviously, that's had its own share of success over the last several seasons with head coach Chris Pollard. Now the question becomes, who's going to be on this roster? Talked a little bit about the player departures a week ago, and that still remains a big question heading into a new baseball season. As Conor O'Neill joins us, we'll step aside for a quick timeout and continue our conversation here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right. It's fitting we're talking about Duke baseball today. Let's talk summer sports now in full swing. Baseball under the lights. It doesn't get much better than that. Go follow the daily game action over at FanDuel to make every game more exciting. Why not make a little bit more thrilling moments throughout your day? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends while getting sunburned at the beach. There's new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. Easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes every regular season game feel like must-watch events. I'm also placing same-game parlays and a bet ride into the 9th inning. FanDuel makes it easy to feel like I'm always a part of the action. Are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Once again, FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep this thing rolling with Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. I'm JJ Jackson. We're talking about Corey Muscara, the new Duke baseball head coach, taking over a Blue Devil program fresh off a trip to Super Regionals, fresh off their first ever opportunity to host postseason games there on campus at Jack Coombs Field. And a lot of people were curious kind of what the baseball resources look like at Duke. But as we talked a little bit last week, Connor, it's very clear the program's on the rise. It seems like there's a good bit of support around the program, and Nina King and that administration's only looking to build on to that.
Yeah, I think that you have to continue forward momentum, and that's what this hire is attempting to do. I don't know if it's going to be able to do that. What the roster looks like right now, it does look like a little bit of a rebuild. I think if Duke had hired a head coach who was able to bring over a lot of talent with him, i.e. Dan Skirko with Murray State, it would be a little bit of a different story, but that's where things are right now. There is a ton of work that needs to be done on this Duke roster right now. They lost a lot of talent. AJ Gracia and Kyle Johnson are going up to Virginia with Chris Pollard. Macon Winslow is staying in the triangle and going to Carolina, as I think we talked about last week. Those are 3 sophomores that might be drafted in the first round come 13 months from now. So it's a daunting task to replace all that, but I think not to get too much onto a soapbox, but I think we spend too much time in college sports, every sport these days, talking about player acquisition, and we neglect the fact that there's other things that go into making a good team, and there's chemistry, there's player development, there is some cohesiveness that goes into this. You can't just throw money at a roster and expect it to compete year in and year out. You can look at Florida State football last year as a prime example of that. So I think there's work to be done on a roster. I think there's work to be done on a coaching staff right now, given everybody went with Chris Pollard to Virginia. But it's a Duke baseball program that needs to that wants to and needs to stay in the upper echelon of the ACC. The changes coming to Coombs can allow that to happen. I'm not sure what's next on the docket with renovations, but I know it's a multi-year project that's going to take a little bit more time still. And then we'll see what kind of product they're able to put on the field.
And as we're talking, Connor, Duke is still yet to officially have a press conference or anything of the sort with Corey Muscara to talk a little bit about his vision for the program. But yeah, you mentioned kind of the player acquisition piece that goes into this. I'm glad you also touched on, hey, you got to acquire some coaches as well, right? Like this can't just be a one-man job. And as gifted as Corey Muscara is in the pitching department, offense and hitting is just as big of a part of this game as well. So that's going to be something people are very curious in, is like, who's going to take over the offensive perspective? Who's going to be that hitting guy for the Duke baseball team?
Yeah, and it's interesting to borrow from the conversations with both of Duke's last football coach, the 2 football coaches that I've covered at Duke, basically, Mike Elko and Manny Diaz. Everybody thinks because they're defensive guys that Duke is just supposed to win every single game 17-13. And they're like, those guys would cringe if they have to score in the 30s to win, but that's not necessarily the case. Like Mike Elko loved being able to put his hands into the offense and say, this is the way I see things as a defensive coordinator. Here's the changes and tweaks that you need to make as an offense, and let's score some freaking points here. Manny Diaz, I think, is the same way. It's once you're that head coach, you kind of have to take off the coordinator or the pitching coach hat and put your hand in the entire program. You're not just responsible for one side of the ball, or in baseballs, you're not just responsible for what happens in one half of an inning. You're there for the totality of it. So I think that's where I'm very interested to pick Moose's brain about how involved he'll be with infield defense, for example, making hit and run decisions, making stolen base, like how aggressive is Duke going to be on the base paths? All of that stuff goes into what a head coach decides, not just
right
what a head coach who is a pitching coach would decide. I think Moose will be fairly involved in a lot of that decision making.
And now he's, like we said, got to find the players. You've got to find the coaching staff to go along with it. At least you've got experience and familiarity within the ACC over the last 4 seasons that's going to be an added benefit. You know, kind of the other coaching personalities across the league and the roster makeup for so many of these teams. Although each and every year we do realize that there's a lot of player movement nowadays that takes place. At least there's some level of comfort if you're Corey Muscara, knowing that you've been in this league before. You've recruited against a lot of these schools and kind of have an idea of what you're walking into.
Yeah, I mean, there is value in knowing the landscape of the league you're going into, and Corey has that. Just the sheer knowledge that comes with knowing what a road trip to Clemson looks like, like what to expect when you go up to Pitt or BC. They're going to be fewer and far between because the league is bigger than it's ever been, and got all indications, or it's not going to get any smaller in the next few years. So there is some value in having somebody come in that doesn't have to learn all about, okay, these are the circumstances when we go to Florida State. These, you get what I'm saying. Corey Muscara is by proxy probably understands the rivalry between Duke and Carolina. I don't know how anybody can live in this state and not be aware of that. So there is some value in a little bit of institutional knowledge, even if he's never been at Duke before. He knows of Duke. He knows of the ACC.
And now he's ready to take over this Duke program. Excited to hear from him a little bit later this week, we're assuming, and we'll get to kind of hear a little bit more about that vision that he's got for this Duke baseball team. All right, we'll take one more time out here on today's episode today of Locked On Blue Devils. And when we come back, I want to dive into some Duke basketball schedule news we've learned over the last few days. Super excited to dive into that when we return here on Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. For your second listen, go ahead and check out The Portal Show. Locked On's very own Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. You can find The Portal on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Those guys do an amazing job talking about everything in the wide world of college hoops. So go check it all out over at the Locked On College Basketball. Find them wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube. Okay, we've got our final few moments here on today's program with Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. We did a little baseball conversation. Now let's dive into some offseason Duke men's basketball thoughts. As Duke has announced, another Brotherhood Run is coming to Cameron Indoor Stadium. They're going to bring some former players who are now head coaches and their teams back, in the likes of Howard and Niagara. Yeah,
I'm always happy when the names get a second year. Like
yeah, exactly.
There's one that Wake did last year with Michigan, ironically enough. And we can get to talk about that in a minute. But the Deacon Wolverine Challenge, I don't know if that's a name that's going to stick for very long. But yeah, Brotherhood Run, year 2 of it. I think it had a chance to be year 3. I think they were calling the failed NIL event in Chicago a couple years ago a Brotherhood Run, and then it got nixed.
Right.
So this is year 2 or 3, depending on your perspective there.
And you look at, last year's Brotherhood Run, you've got Arizona State coming to your building in an exhibition format.
Right.
So now let's put some regular season action up for grabs with these 2 games Duke will play.
Yeah, twice the former Duke captains coming to Cameron, twice the meaning of the games, honestly, because that exhibition state game Arizona State exhibition was nice to watch. It was good theater, I'm sure. What was the game at halftime? Like 60-19 or something crazy.
Unreachable for Arizona State.
I know what it wound up being, and I know that Bobby Hurley basically delivered the line of the season when it comes to visiting coaches in Cameron this year. Hats off to where they are, and oh shit about where we are. But yeah, look, we knew Duke's non-conference was already a gauntlet. You didn't expect this to be marquee opponents So if you're going to fill out your schedule with some low to mid-major programs, why not bring in Greg Paulus and Kenny Blakeney's teams and have them at Cameron, have them play each other so that everybody gets a little round robin feel to it. And the other part that I kind of love about this is it's a huge weekend in the Triangle for Duke because they play Niagara on the 21st, which is a Friday night. The football team plays at Carolina on Saturday, and who knows where either team will be. I mean, that's game 11 for both of them. So
Right.
There's so much that can happen. They might be fighting for bowl eligibility. They might be fighting for a spot in Charlotte, anywhere in between. They might be two lower tier ACC teams. Who knows? And then the Sunday, I assume that's going to be a Sunday afternoon game against Howard, and then everybody gets out of town. And Niagara and Howard, if you're really interested in going to see them play in Cameron, you can on that Saturday. So it's a nice setup. I like what Duke has done with this, and I always like the aspect of making it a tournament feel, even if it's just 3 teams in an MTE.
Yeah, and we've already talked about how loaded the non-conference schedule is against, the big schools. And so now you've got an opportunity to bring some other guys in, get some game action. This is, where Duke is early in November trying to figure out early season chemistry things and whatnot there. But you've also got the dynamic with Kenny Blakeney there at Howard. He just employed Tyler Thornton for 6 seasons, and now Tyler Thornton's on the Duke staff. So that's exciting. And then obviously Niagara led by Greg Paulus, who played with Jon Scheyer for 3 seasons, 1 year older than Scheyer and graduated in 2009. Scheyer out after the 2010 year. So just so many connections within Duke basketball itself. We're able to kind of do this year-by-year brotherhood run when you got so many head coaches across the sport.
Yeah, you can take advantage of the tree and the network that has been cast out by Coach K. The interesting part of this too for me is, I guess this if my math is correct, the Tuesday night game, the week leading into this weekend would be November 18th. That's the Kansas game in the Champions Classic up in New York. Right. And then Duke is going to come out of this weekend against Niagara and Howard and go play Arkansas on Thanksgiving night in Chicago. So Duke will have already played Texas and Kansas when it plays these 2 games. It's going to come out of this and go play what I think is 3 games in a row. I can't imagine Duke would slide in somebody else in between here, but it's 3 games in a row against Arkansas, Florida, and at Michigan State. So this is we're going to get to this point. Duke will have played, I think it's 5 games. I think it'll be 5 games. We'll know a little bit about them. Right. This will be in the area of the season where some Duke fans are ready to light themselves on fire because Duke hasn't beaten everybody by 20. And it's going to be a little bit of a reset, not to diminish the teams that I know nothing about with Niagara and Howard, but it's going to be a little bit of a reset between marquee games. And then we're gonna get to see a little bit of growth, and then Duke is gonna go play a 3-game gauntlet. I keep using that word, gauntlet of a schedule there.
It's a fair word to use with the teams and opponents that Duke's got on the schedule this year. So we'll take non-gauntlet teams out of it for a moment and set up. So far, we know of Western Carolina, Army, Indiana State, and now Niagara and Howard set to be in the mix for Duke basketball. And it seems as though there could be a chance for one more non-conference game for Duke to add, which when you're kind of looking to count wins is the way you can look at some of these games. If you're a program like Duke, bring another one in.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think, the ACC going to an 18-game conference slate and lopping 2 of those games off gives ACC teams the chance to add 2 more. And Duke has clearly taken advantage of that and added some marquee games. Duke is not adding Howard and Niagara to replace 2 ACC games. I'm not quite sure which ones actually get added in the calculus of it. if I thought on a little more, I could probably come up with it. But look, like, I think Duke adds one more game against a quasi-local team like an Elon or an ECU or whoever. That would almost have to be in December at this point when you think about the logistics of what November looks like between game in Chicago, game at West Point, game in Charlotte to open the season, in New York for the Champions Classic. So one more in December, and you can play, I think it's 30 games or 31 if you get an exemption, which almost everybody gets. And I think Duke's exemption comes with the MTE being Howard and Niagara.
Yep. And so now they'll have a great schedule put forth here. We'll see, obviously, we know the ACC opponents that are going to be on the Duke schedule this season, and now we're starting to fill more things out. We know a little bit more about this Michigan game as well. It's finally been assigned a date. We knew it would take some place in February, and so I believe February 21st is the day that's been given for this game. So that's going to be fun to have a big non-conference test again in the midst of ACC play.
Yeah, and you know, not to imply that other coaches do bullshit, but I think we all know that sometimes they do. You know, John told us going into the Illinois game, it was only about 4 months ago. It seems like an eternity ago, but John told us, you know, he wanted to do this more. Like, he wants to do this every year. He felt good about it when they put it on the schedule last year in the summer when it was being worked out. And then when it got to the point in the season where it was, and seeing the benefits of stepping outside of your comfort zone, stepping outside of the ACC, playing a game that can change a little bit of the narrative about your league, he loved every bit of what that meant. Sure. And he told us then and there, before they went out and won by 43 and looked like world beaters, and Spencer Hubbard was hitting a step back three in the final minute there, he told us like he was going to do everything in his power to make sure that this game was on the schedule again. And that's what this is.
He's done that, yep.
Play Michigan, a team that I think in everybody's way too early top 25s is in the top 15 or 20, right? They get Yaxel Landesborg out of the portal. He's a NBA player.
Elliot Cadeau from North Carolina will be there with Michigan.
This is the second time I've forgotten to mention that. I have some mental block about mentioning Elliot Cadeau being there, and it's only a matter of time before Michelle Cadeau pops into my mentions to tell me about it. But yeah, it's I wish more teams would do this. I understand Duke has a little bit more capability to do this and play these marquee type games because they are Duke, but this is what everybody in the ACC should be looking to do.
It's great news to discuss, and it's a great schedule for Duke basketball to prepare for with this upcoming season. Connor, always appreciate your time. Love getting to bounce around from new baseball coach to some of these new notes that we know about the Duke men's basketball schedule. And you've got it all covered over at Devils Illustrated. Tell us about your work.
Yeah, duke.rivals.com is where you can find that. We're got a merger with On3, so you'll have even more access to content. We're not going anywhere. Some other rival sites are not as fortunate, but I'm happy to tell you that Devils Illustrated will continue, and hope y'all pop in there and check it out.
All right. Thanks for the time today, Connor. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
That's Conor O'Neill joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that brings us to a close here on today's show. Make sure you go support his work over at duke.rivals.com and continue to support our work here with Locked On Blue Devils. Subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Comment down below if you're an everydayer. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. All right, that'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.